My beloved child, stop scrolling for just a moment. Do not rush past these words, because in this fictional message from heaven, something happened last night that your heart needs to hear before the story moves any further. Something was revealed in the stillness of the night. Something that had been hidden behind ordinary conversations, unanswered messages, forced smiles, and the strange feeling that someone you love was carrying a burden they could not explain. Pause here, take one slow breath, because this message is not arriving with fear. It is arriving with protection. In the story heaven is revealing to you now, your soulmate was surrounded by an atmosphere they could not understand. They woke suddenly in the middle of the night with their heart racing, not because they knew exactly what was wrong, but because something inside them whispered that they should pay attention. The room was quiet. The world outside seemed asleep. Yet in that silence, a memory came to them with unusual force, your face, your voice, and one unfinished conversation between you. They did not understand why that memory appeared at that exact moment. They tried to turn over and go back to sleep, but the feeling would not leave. There was a heaviness around their heart, followed by an overwhelming sense that someone or something had been interfering with their peace, and then they remembered a person they had been ignoring. Someone whose presence had seemed harmless, someone whose words had appeared friendly, someone whose intentions were not as transparent as they seemed. This is where the message becomes deeper, my child, because the danger in this fictional story does not arrive wearing a dark cloak. It does not announce itself. It does not walk into the room and declare what it intends to do. It smiles, it speaks softly, it offers reasons, it pretends to care, and that is why your soulmate did not recognize the warning at first. There is someone around them who has been carrying an unhealthy intention. Not necessarily an intention to cause physical harm, but an intention to interfere, manipulate, isolate, deceive, or damage the trust surrounding your soulmate. Someone has been watching the connection from the outside and quietly forming opinions about it. They may have asked questions that sounded innocent. They may have said, "I'm only trying to protect you." They may have warned your soulmate about people they barely understood, and slowly, almost invisibly, they began planting doubt, one sentence at a time, one suggestion at a time, one carefully chosen story at a time. Your soulmate listened because they were already vulnerable. They were already confused about their feelings for you. They already had fears about getting too close, and when someone speaks directly to an insecurity you have been trying to hide, their words can sound like wisdom. That is what happened. Your soulmate began questioning things they had once felt naturally. They wondered whether you truly cared. They wondered whether the connection was safe. They wondered whether they were being foolish for trusting their heart. And while they were asking those questions, the person influencing them remained nearby, watching the confusion grow. But last night, something changed. Your soulmate remembered something you once told them. It may have been a simple sentence, something you barely remember saying. Perhaps you told them that love should never require fear. Perhaps you told them that if something ever felt wrong, they should listen to their intuition. Perhaps you simply told them, "You can always talk to me." Those words returned to them in the darkness, and suddenly, they began connecting pieces that had never seemed connected before: a strange conversation, a suspicious question, a missing detail, a sudden change in someone's behavior, a warning that had seemed protective but had never actually made sense. They began wondering whether the person they trusted had been telling them the complete truth, and that realization frightened them. Not because they suddenly knew everything, but because they realized they might have been looking in the wrong direction. My child, listen carefully to the heart of this fictional message. Sometimes the greatest threat to a meaningful connection is not an obvious enemy. Sometimes it is confusion. Sometimes it is manipulation. Sometimes it is a person who slowly convinces one heart that the other heart cannot be trusted, and that is exactly what began happening here. Your soulmate was being encouraged to distance themselves from you without being given a reason strong enough to justify that distance. They were told to wait. They were told to be careful. They were told that perhaps you were not who you appeared to be. But whenever your soulmate asked for proof, the answers became vague. That should have been enough to make them suspicious. Yet fear is clever. Fear does not always demand that you believe a lie. Sometimes it only asks you to question the truth. And your soulmate began questioning everything, even you, even themselves, even the connection they had secretly treasured. There were moments when they wanted to reach out to you but stopped because someone else's voice was sitting inside their mind. There were nights when they opened your conversation, stared at your name, and then closed it without sending anything. You may have believed they did not care. They cared. That was the problem. They cared so much that they became vulnerable to the fear of losing control. And someone noticed. Someone recognized that your soulmate had a weakness around emotional uncertainty, and instead of helping them heal it, they used it. That is why heaven, within this fictional story, is not telling you to panic. It is telling you to become discerning. Do not chase shadows. Do not accuse people without evidence. Do not confront anyone because of a dramatic message on a screen. Instead, notice what is real. Notice patterns. Notice whether someone consistently creates fear, division, secrecy, or distrust. Notice whether your soulmate is being isolated from people who genuinely care about them. Notice whether their choices are truly theirs, because the most dangerous manipulation is the kind that makes a person believe they are acting freely while someone else has been quietly guiding their decisions. Last night, your soulmate began to see that possibility. And then something happened that they cannot easily explain. They dreamed of you. In the dream, they were standing somewhere unfamiliar. The sky was almost completely dark, but there was a narrow path illuminated in the distance. They heard footsteps behind them and turned around, but no one was there. Then they heard your voice, not calling their name, not asking them to come back, just saying one sentence: look carefully before you trust what you are being told. They woke up before dawn. For several moments, they simply stared at the ceiling, and then they reached for their phone. They opened your conversation. Their finger hovered over the message box. They wanted to tell you what had happened. They wanted to ask whether you had been feeling something strange too, but they stopped, because another thought entered their mind. What if I'm imagining all of this? And this is the battle happening inside them now. One voice says, trust what you feel. Another says, you're being paranoid. One voice says, ask questions. Another says, stay silent. One voice says, something is wrong. Another says, nothing is wrong. Just move on. The truth is buried between those voices, and your soulmate is trying to find it. My beloved child, there is something. They do not necessarily hate your soulmate. Their motive may be more complicated than hatred. They may be jealous. They may be afraid of losing influence. They may believe they know what is best. They may have their own unresolved wounds. They may resent the way your soulmate changes when they are around you. Because your soulmate became different after meeting you, they became softer, more hopeful, more willing to imagine a future, and someone noticed. Someone who had grown accustomed to having emotional influence over them noticed that your soulmate no longer needed the same kind of approval. That changed the balance, and when a person feels their influence slipping away, they may try to restore it, not always through open conflict, sometimes through subtle comments. Are you sure? Something feels off. I don't trust them. You deserve better. I'm only saying this because I care. These phrases can sound loving, but love without truth can become control, and your soulmate is beginning to recognize the difference. There was one particular conversation that has returned to their mind repeatedly. It happened some time ago. Someone said something about you that seemed strangely specific, even though you had never told that person anything directly. Your soulmate did not notice the significance then. Last night, they did. They realized that the person knew a detail they should not have known, and suddenly, another memory surfaced, a private conversation, a piece of information, a moment that should have remained between two people. Your soulmates sat there in the darkness, asking themselves the question they had been avoiding. How did they know? That question opened a door. Behind it were more questions. How long had they known? Who had told them? Why had they never mentioned it? Why had they encouraged distance afterward? And why did every conversation with them somehow leave your soulmate feeling more afraid than before? My child, this is where the atmosphere shifts. Because your soulmate is no longer simply thinking about the past. They are watching the present. They are paying attention. They are noticing who celebrates their happiness and who becomes uncomfortable when they seem peaceful. They are noticing who respects boundaries and who constantly crosses them. They are noticing who gives honest advice and who demands obedience disguised as concern. And slowly, the mask begins to crack. Not dramatically. Not all at once, but enough. For your soulmate to realize that something has not been right. And there is another reason this matters, because this person may not have only been influencing your soulmate, they may have been trying to influence the way your soulmate sees you. That is far more personal. They may have taken something you said and changed its meaning. They may have taken one misunderstanding and turned it into evidence. They may have taken one moment of distance and presented it as proof that you never cared. They may have taken your silence and filled it with a story you never told, and your soulmate believed parts of it because they were already afraid. But now they are remembering the moments that contradict the story, the times you showed up, the times you listened, the times you understood without being asked, the moments when your eyes said something your words could not. They are remembering the version of you that existed before someone else's interpretation entered the room. And that memory is becoming stronger. Last night, your soulmate made a private decision. They decided they would no longer accept someone else's version of you without asking you directly. They decided they would listen to facts instead of rumors. They decided they would stop allowing fear to make decisions on their behalf. That decision may seem small. It is not, because it is the first crack in the wall that has been separating you. But there is still something you do not know. The person who has been interfering may realize that your soulmate is beginning to question them, and when someone realizes they are losing influence, they may make one final attempt to regain control. That attempt could come through a message, a sudden phone call, an unexpected meeting, a dramatic story, a new accusation, or something that looks like a coincidence but creates just enough emotional pressure to make your soulmate retreat again. This is why the message says, do not ignore. Not because you should become afraid, not because you should believe every spiritual warning you hear, not because you should assume someone is secretly plotting against the person you love, but because, within this fictional story, your soulmate is approaching a moment where discernment matters more than emotion, and so are you. You must not let fear turn you against innocent people. You must not let suspicion become obsession. You must not search for enemies everywhere. Instead, stay grounded. If something genuinely concerning happens, respond to what actually happens. If your soulmate tells you they feel unsafe, listen. If they need practical support, encourage them to seek it. If there is a real threat, they should contact trusted people or appropriate authorities. Heaven does not require recklessness. Protection and wisdom walk together. And now, my beloved child, we come to the part of the story that happened just before sunrise. Your soulmate was still awake. The room was beginning to fill with the faintest gray light. They looked at their phone again. Your name was still there. Their hand trembled slightly. They opened the message window. This time, they began typing. They wrote 3 words, then erased them. They wrote a sentence, erased it. They started again. I need to tell you something. They stopped. Their heart was beating faster, because they knew that once they sent that message, the silence between you might finally break. But before they could press send, another notification appeared. It was from the very person they had begun to distrust, and the message contained information that made your soulmate freeze, because it referred to something that had happened between you and your soulmate that almost nobody knew about. Something private, something that should have remained hidden, something that proved this was not merely a misunderstanding. Your soulmate stared at the screen, then they whispered, "How do you know that?" And at that exact moment, they realized the person interfering with them may have known far more than they ever imagined. They looked back at your name. Their finger moved toward the call button, but before they could press it, another message arrived. this one was shorter, much shorter, and after reading it, your soulmate's entire expression changed, because the final line was not a warning about you. It was a warning about what would happen if your soulmate told you the truth. They read it once, then again, and for the first time, they understood why this person had been so desperate to keep the two of you apart, because the secret they were protecting was not about your soulmate, it was about them, and my beloved child. Before the sun fully rose, your soulmate finally discovered the one piece of information that could expose everything, but they have not told you yet. A moment. Something has been placed in your path tonight that you were never meant to overlook. Before you continue with your day, before you send another message, before you close your eyes and tell yourself that the strange feeling in your heart means nothing, listen. What you are about to hear is a fictional spiritual message, a cinematic story of divine protection and intuition, created to speak to the part of you that knows sometimes love notices danger before the mind can explain it. Something happened last night, and in the stillness of that night, when the world became quiet and the distractions disappeared, your soulmate entered a moment they may never fully understand. They woke suddenly, not knowing why. Their heart was beating differently. Their thoughts were racing towards someone they could not explain. And somewhere deep within them came a feeling that something in their life was changing. You may have felt it too. Perhaps you woke from an unusual dream. Perhaps you suddenly thought about your soulmate without any obvious reason. Perhaps you reached for your phone and hesitated before checking it. Perhaps you felt an inexplicable heaviness, followed moments later by an overwhelming desire to make sure they were okay. Do not be frightened by that feeling, listen to it, because in this story, heaven is not revealing fear to you. Heaven is revealing awareness. There is a difference. Fear tells you to panic. Divine wisdom tells you to become still. Fear makes you imagine the worst. Discernment asks you to observe what is real, and last night, something shifted around your soulmate, not necessarily in the way you first imagined. The danger may not be a dramatic figure hiding in the shadows. It may be a person whose intentions have been disguised beneath kindness. It may be manipulation that looks like friendship. It may be jealousy that smiles while quietly watching. It may be someone who has been studying your soulmate's weaknesses, waiting for the right opportunity to take advantage of their trust. That is why this message begins with caution. Not panic, caution. Your soulmate has been carrying something privately. They may not have told you because they did not want to burden you. They may have noticed strange behavior from someone around them but dismissed it. They may have received a message that felt slightly wrong. They may have encountered someone whose words sounded harmless but whose energy left them uncomfortable, and there was one moment last night when they remembered you. That moment matters, because sometimes the person we love becomes a mirror through which our intuition finally becomes clear. Your soulmate remembered something you once said. Maybe it was a simple sentence. Maybe you told them to trust their instincts. Maybe you once warned them not to ignore the feeling they get when someone's actions do not match their words. Maybe you simply told them, you don't have to prove your loyalty to people who make you feel unsafe. They remembered those words last night, and suddenly, something they had been overlooking began to look different: a conversation, a pattern, a name, a strange coincidence, a behavior that had seemed insignificant suddenly connected to something else. Your soulmate began asking questions, and the answers did not bring peace. This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The person who may be causing concern is not necessarily someone your soulmate fears. In fact, it could be someone they trusted, someone familiar, someone who knows enough about their personal life to understand where they are vulnerable. That is why you must listen carefully. In this fictional spiritual message, the thread is not being revealed so that you become suspicious of everyone around you. It is being revealed so that you remember the importance of boundaries, awareness, and wisdom. Not everyone who approaches your soulmate deserves access to their heart. Not everyone who asks questions deserves answers. Not everyone who appears supportive is genuinely celebrating their happiness. And there are people who become uncomfortable when they see someone they once understood beginning to grow beyond the version they could control. Your soulmate has been changing. They have become stronger. They have become less available to manipulation. They have started questioning old patterns, and someone around them has noticed. That person may not want to see them destroyed. They may simply want to see them remain exactly where they were. But sometimes control does not announce itself as control. It arrives as guilt. It sounds like, "After everything I've done for you." It appears as pressure. It disguises itself as concern. And your soulmate has begun recognizing the difference. Last night, in the quiet hours, they replayed a recent conversation in their mind. At first, they thought nothing of it. Then they remembered the expression on that person's face. The pause before answering, the question that seemed strangely specific, the sudden change in tone when your soulmate mentioned you. And that final detail made their heart stop for a moment, because someone had asked about you, not casually, too specifically. They wanted to know how close you and your soulmate had become. They wanted to know what your soulmate had told you. They wanted to know whether you were planning something together. And your soulmate had brushed it aside at the time. But last night, those questions returned, one by one, and suddenly, they wondered why someone would care so much. My beloved child, this is where I want you to breathe. Do not turn this story into a reason to accuse someone in your real life without evidence. Do not allow a spiritual message to replace common sense or real-world safety. If someone is actually threatening your soulmate, the answer is practical protection, trusted people, appropriate authorities, and professional help. But within this cinematic story, heaven is teaching you something deeper. Your intuition is not asking you to become paranoid. It is asking you to become awake. There is a difference between seeing danger everywhere and refusing to ignore obvious warning signs. And your soulmate has been ignoring something, for longer than you know. They have been telling themselves that a certain person means well. They have been explaining away uncomfortable behavior. They have been making excuses. They didn't mean it. They're probably stressed. They're just protective. They've always been like this. But sometimes the sentence we repeat to excuse someone's behavior becomes the very sentence that prevents us from seeing the truth. Last night, your soulmate stopped making excuses, and that is when everything changed. They remembered the times this person appeared whenever your soulmate was becoming emotionally independent. They remembered how conversations changed whenever your soulmate spoke about their future. They remembered the subtle attempts to make them doubt their own decisions. They remembered the moments when happiness was followed by criticism. And then they remembered something even more disturbing. There had been a pattern. Every time your soulmate moved closer to peace, someone seemed determined to pull them back toward confusion. Every time they gained confidence, someone questioned them. Every time they spoke about love, someone planted doubt. Every time they tried to step forward, someone reminded them of the past. Your soulmate had thought these were separate events. Now they were seeing them as one story, and once a pattern becomes visible, it is very difficult to pretend you cannot see it. That is why something happened last night. Not necessarily an attack, not necessarily a physical event. Something happened inside your soulmate. Their awareness awakened, their instincts became louder, and somewhere between midnight and morning, they made a private decision. They would stop giving everyone unlimited access to their life. They would stop explaining every move. They would stop revealing every plan. They would stop allowing other people to make decisions for them, and most importantly, they would protect the relationship that matters to them without allowing outside voices to define it. You may wonder why this concerns you, because your soulmate has connected you to a part of their future that someone else may not understand. You represent possibility. You represent change. You represent a life they have not yet fully stepped into. And whenever someone begins moving toward a new life, the old environment sometimes reacts, not because destiny is fragile, because human beings can be. Some people celebrate your growth, others become uncomfortable when your growth means they can no longer control your choices. That is the hidden tension surrounding your soulmate in this story. And there is another layer. Your soulmate has not told you everything. Not because they do not trust you, because they are trying to protect you. They know you would immediately become concerned if they told you about every strange interaction. They know you might confront someone. They know your emotions could become intense. So they chose silence. But silence has a cost. When people we love hide their concerns in an attempt to protect us, they sometimes leave us without the information we need to understand their behavior. That may be why your soulmate has seemed distant, why they suddenly became quieter, why they stopped sharing certain details, why they appear distracted when you speak. They have been processing something, and last night, they finally admitted to themselves that they cannot keep pretending everything is normal. Then came the dream.